very, very early on the Wednesday morning between the death and the funeral. And I just sat down and wrote it. And it took about an hour and a half and just came pouring out, really. Actually, it's interesting. Sounds rather sort of bizarre, but I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it, and I read it to her in there. And I did sort of feel a sort of...
4 words. That is all it took. 4 words, reportedly delivered to a Netflix proposal in the early weeks of 2026, and a vault that has stayed bolted shut for nearly 3 decades suddenly became the loudest silence in the world. Is this a joke? That is what Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, Diana's youngest brother, is said to have written back when the most powerful streaming company on the planet asked him to open the most valuable private archive in modern royal history. And here is the promise I am making to you right now, the loop I am opening that I will close before we are done. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why those 4 words carry the weight of 28 years of grief, 1 buried secret, and a guilt so heavy it has quietly governed every single decision this man has made since the night before his sister's funeral. Stay with me. This one has layers, and the layers are the whole story. Let me start with the thing almost nobody stops to consider. There is a man in England sitting on one of the richest archives in living memory, private home movies, handwritten diaries, page after page in Diana's own hand, photographs the world has never seen. Footage of a princess before the planet ever learned her name. And in all that time, through every anniversary, every documentary, every streaming bidding war, every network executive who came knocking since the autumn of 1997, he has never once turned the key. Not for money, not for legacy, not for any of the hundreds of producers who have made the journey to his door. His name is Charles Spencer. And until very recently, most of the world had quietly forgotten he existed. So let me ask you something honestly. When did you last think about him? Not Diana, not Harry, not William, Charles Spencer, specifically. If you are being truthful with yourself, most people can point to exactly one moment. Westminster Abbey, the 6th of September, 1997. A global audience estimated at 2 billion people. A young man in a black suit walking to a lectern in one of the most historic churches on earth, carrying a single sheet of paper, reading words so charged with grief and fury and love that the applause began out in the streets and rolled through those ancient stone walls like thunder. He made a promise that day, not a soft, general expression of sorrow, a vow. He promised that Diana's sons would be raised with warmth and imagination. He promised that her blood family would shield those boys from the cold institutional rigidity that had, in his words, crushed their mother. And he said it while looking directly at the Queen, at Prince Philip, at the future king, all seated mere feet away. He said it in front of 2 billion witnesses, and he did not flinch on a single syllable. And then he went home to Northamptonshire. And that, for most of the world, is the last time his existence registered at all. Here is the part most people get completely wrong. That long, deliberate invisibility is not a footnote. It is the entire key to what is unfolding right now. Because Charles Spencer is 62 years old, he is the custodian of a family estate that has held its land for 5 centuries. And he has spent every single year since 1997 doing something almost no other figure connected to Diana has ever managed. He kept his word. Now think about the machine that has been built around Diana. Her face on magazine covers in every language, her dresses behind glass in museums, her voice threaded through documentary after documentary, her image on postage stamps, on perfume bottles, on the cover of nearly every book ever written about the modern British monarchy. An entire commercial cathedral constructed brick by brick on the foundation of one woman's tragedy. And here is a detail worth pausing on, because it reframes the man entirely. The Spencer family did not arrive with Diana. They were aristocracy in England for centuries before a single Windsor ever wore a crown in the form we know today. 500 years on the same land, generations of Earls. A lineage that by blood and by history runs older and deeper than the institution Diana married into. So when Charles Spencer stood at that lectern and spoke about Diana's blood family as something separate from and protective against the machinery of the palace that was not wounded pride talking, that was a man speaking from 5 centuries of standing. It matters because it tells you he never needed the monarchy for status and he has never needed the cameras for relevance, which makes his 30 years of silence a choice, not a limitation. And Charles Spencer has never laid a single original brick in it. Let that actually sink in. Every Diana documentary you have ever watched was assembled from the same shared pool of public footage, the same clips recycled since the 1990s. The same photographs that every picture archive already owns, the originals, the real ones, the unguarded ones, he has never loaned. Not to the BBC, not to ITV, not to Netflix or Amazon or any of the American networks that have come calling across 30 years. So ask yourself the question almost nobody asks: why? What does a man have to believe about protecting someone's memory to turn down that volume of money, that scale of public opportunity for that long? Hold that question, because the answer is the master key to everything that follows. And here is my honest read, the one I will defend through this whole story. When you finally understand what is actually driving that silence, those 4 words stop sounding like aristocratic contempt. They start sounding like the only possible sentence a man carrying that particular weight could ever say. But before we reach the vault, we have to walk the road that led to it. And it begins the way so much in this family seems to begin, with something small and beautiful and apparently innocent. The jewelry. Picture the royal wedding, May 2018, the evening reception. Meghan Markle arrives wearing Diana's aquamarine ring, that unmistakable pale blue stone anyone with even a passing knowledge of Diana's story would recognize on sight. And from where Charles Spencer stood watching, it likely felt rather lovely. Someone new, someone his nephew so clearly adored, choosing to carry Diana into the most important night of her own life. It felt like remembrance. It may even have felt like family. Then came the butterfly earrings, then the Cartier tank watch, then the gold bracelets, piece by piece, appearance by appearance, object by object. Each item that had once belonged to Diana resurfacing on Meghan at precisely the moments where photography was not merely possible, but guaranteed. Major events, carefully choreographed arrivals, maximum lens coverage every single time. Now, I want to be scrupulously fair here, because fairness is the whole point, and I want you to hold this thought carefully in one hand. Nobody can prove the intentions were anything other than genuine tribute. Grief does strange and tender things inside families. Meghan was newly married into one of the most emotionally complicated dynasties in the modern world. There is a real, human, completely understandable version of this story in which every one of those choices was exactly what it appeared to be. A daughter-in-law honoring a woman she would never meet, but whose sons she now loved. Hold that version in one hand. Now hold this question in the other. When does tribute become pattern? When does pattern become strategy? Once is tribute, twice is habit, but every single time to a guaranteed camera. That is no longer an accident. That is a decision. And the man at Althorpe was watching every frame of it. And here's what I think actually shifted inside him, watching it unfold. It is one thing to honor the dead. It is another to wear them. There is a difference, a real and important one, between keeping a person's memory alive and putting their possessions to work. A ring worn quietly at home is remembrance. The same ring worn at the precise instant the longest lenses in the world are pointed at you becomes something closer to a costume, a signal, a borrowed authority. And the longer the pattern ran, the harder it became to read each new appearance as simple coincidence, because coincidence does not repeat on a schedule. Coincidence does not show up only when the photographers are confirmed. By the time you have seen the same thing happen a dozen times in a dozen perfectly lit settings, you are no longer watching a series of accidents. You are watching a method, That is the moment, I suspect, when warmth quietly became wariness in the house at Althorpe. Keep that in mind, because the jewelry was only the opening act. What came next is where, by most accounts, the warmth reportedly began to curdle into something a great deal colder. The interview, March 2021. You remember it, the entire planet remembers it, but I want you to remember it the way Charles Spencer reportedly watched it, alone. From inside the very house where Diana grew up, the lighting was low and golden, the setting soft, intimate, confessional, one woman, one sympathetic interviewer. One faceless institution that had, she said, silenced her, dismissed her mental health, and left her isolated with no door open except the door to the public. And if you know Diana's story, the chill of recognition hits you immediately, because that is, almost beat for beat, the architecture of Diana's own televised interview from 1995. Run the comparison yourself. A royal wife, isolated, speaking of an institution deaf to her suffering. The palace has closed every door, so she goes directly over its head, straight to the public, through one trusted interviewer, hushed lighting, a confessional stillness. The sense of secrets finally escaping into the open air. Every element rhymed. The lighting rhymed, the grammar of victimhood rhymed, the casting rhymed. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one faceless institution. There's only one element that changed between 1995 and 2021, and it is the most telling difference of them all. Diana gave her interview while still trapped inside the system, with no exit in sight and everything in the world to lose. The later version was filmed from a villa in Montecito, California. After the exit, with a production apparatus attached and a streaming deal already signed, the original was a cry for help. The remake, whatever else you choose to believe about it, was a launch. And watching from the house where his sister grew up, Charles Spencer reportedly did not experience that hour as a tribute at all. How could he? And to understand why, you have to hear the part of this story that almost no royal coverage will touch. The secret that built the vault. The single piece of history that unlocks every locked door after it. So, here it is. By long-standing accounts, it was Charles Spencer himself who first brought his sister into contact with Martin Bashir, the journalist behind that 1995 interview. The very interview the world now knows was obtained through forged documents and calculated psychological manipulation, fabricated bank statements, fake evidence of surveillance, manufactured proof of betrayal. All of it engineered to convince a frightened, isolated woman that everyone around her was an enemy, and that her only safe move was to sit before a camera and bleed for the nation. Diana's vulnerability was not incidental to that broadcast. Her vulnerability was the product, and her younger brother, by these accounts, had unknowingly held the door open. When the full truth of how that interview was engineered finally surfaced years later, it reportedly hit Charles Spencer like a landslide, because it meant that he, however innocently, however unknowingly, had played a part in one of the most profound exploitations of his sister's suffering during her lifetime. Think about what that does to a person. Think about it slowly. You spend your entire adult life believing you are your sister's protector. You stand in Westminster Abbey, in front of 2 billion witnesses, and you tell the world you will shield her sons from the machinery that damaged her. And then you learn that the single most psychologically destructive media event of her final years walked through a door that you opened. So everything since, by every account, has been an act of atonement. The sealed archives, the refusals, decade after decade after decade. The decision to bury Diana on the island at Althorpe rather than surrender her resting place to the institution, the unseen home movies, the handwritten diaries that no one outside the Spencer family has ever read. He has been doing penance, making absolutely certain that nothing like that broadcast can ever happen to Diana again, even in death, even now, even 30 years later. And in doing it, he has achieved something genuinely extraordinary, something almost no famous figure of the modern age has been granted. He has protected Diana's mystery. There is a private Diana the world has never been allowed to consume, a real, unguarded, fully human version of her, And she exists, still, only because one man has spent 3 decades saying no. So now put yourself in his chair. You have spent 28 years atoning for a single introduction. You have turned away every network, every publisher, every production company, every offer that ever crossed your threshold. And then a courier arrives with a proposal. Let me tell you exactly what was reportedly inside it. Because once you hear the full list of what they asked for, the response stops looking like contempt and starts looking like the only rational answer a man in his position could possibly give. The pitch was a grand anniversary documentary timed for 2027, 30 years since Paris, 30 years of grief, 30 years of unanswered questions. An emotional, cinematic, definitive Diana film fronted by her own son. On paper, it sounds compelling. Netflix reportedly loved it on the spot. The budget was described as substantial. And on the surface, the intent looked like a love letter to Diana's memory. But here is what the project reportedly required. They wanted Althorpe itself, the childhood home, the grounds, the lake, the island. They reportedly wanted access to Diana's personal handwritten diaries, the pages she wrote for herself, never for an audience, never for publication. They wanted home movies that have never been seen, the unguarded footage, the real private Diana no one outside the family has ever touched. Without those elements, it would be just another history documentary stitched from the same recycled clips as every other one made in the last 30 years. With them, it would be the definitive Diana film of the century. And there was one more thing, one angle, the angle that made the pitch irresistible to the people selling it, and reportedly catastrophic to the man reading it. They reportedly wanted to draw a straight, explicit line between Diana's war with the establishment and Meghan's war with the same forces. To position Meghan Markle as the modern continuation of Diana's story, the 21st century version of the woman who refused to be silenced, Diana's halo, formally transferred to a new head. Think about what Charles Spencer saw when he read that. He had watched the jewelry, he had watched the interview, he had watched the Netflix documentary series in which a couple fleeing the media framed themselves explicitly as hunted by the very same machine that destroyed Diana. He had watched, piece by piece, as his sister's tragedy was converted into someone else's origin story without a single phone call to Althorpe. And now they wanted the vault itself, the diaries, the island, the originals. To crown a successor, of course he said what he said. Honestly, the only surprise is that he kept it to 4 words. Is this a joke? Those 4 words were not arrogance, they were not old money disdain for the cameras, they were 28 years of grief and guilt and atonement compressed into a single sentence. Now, to understand why this particular documentary mattered so desperately to the Sussex operation, you have to look honestly at the state of their media empire in early 2026. The Netflix arrangement reportedly valued around $100 million. The 5-year deal that bankrolled the California dream had been hanging by a thread. The flagship project meant to steady the ship was the lifestyle series With Love, Meghan. Instead, it became the iceberg. The reviews arrived thick, fast, and brutal. And here is the detail that sharpens everything, so pay attention. The Guardian is no royalist publication. It is a paper that has long argued for reform of the monarchy and has repeatedly, forcefully condemned the treatment of Meghan over the years. If any outlet in British print was predisposed to love that show, it was The Guardian. They gave it 1 star. One of their critics suggested it might be the last thing Meghan ever makes for Netflix. When the entire spectrum of British media converges on the same verdict, from the Republican broadsheet all the way to the Royal Fan Weekly, that is not a review problem, that is a product problem. Now here is the skeleton key to this whole saga. The couple's debut documentary, the one that unpacked their exit from royal life, remains the most watched debut in Netflix history. The most watched. And their projects since, each one met a progressively cooler reception. The series about the games for wounded veterans, the one about polo, the lifestyle show, each landing softer than the last. The message from the audience could not be louder if it were written across the sky. The world is not interested in a lifestyle brand. The world is interested in royal wounds. The only Sussex product that has ever truly sold is proximity. Proximity to the crown and proximity to Diana. Which is precisely why, when the brunch economy collapsed, the pitch deck reached straight for the deepest royal wound there is. The Spotify arrangement had already folded. The lifestyle venture was not gaining the traction it needed. The Netflix deal was reportedly due to expire, with renewal anything but certain. According to one royal commentator, losing Netflix would represent a major blow, one from which recovery would be immensely difficult. So do you see what the Diana documentary actually was? It was not a passion project, it was a rescue flare. The single card left in the deck guaranteed to pull a global audience because it was the only card printed with the one royal story bigger than their own exit. Let me lay the decline out plainly, like a scorecard, because the shape of it tells the whole story. Project 1, the exit documentary, the most watched debut in the platform's history, a phenomenon. Project 2, the series about wounded veterans and the games built to honor them, a cooler reception, respectable but no longer a sensation. Project 3, the series about polo, quieter still, the audience drifting. Project 4, the lifestyle show built around brunches and famous friends, the collapse. 1 star from the very paper most sympathetic to Meghan. Read those 4 projects in a row and the trend line is impossible to miss. It bends in one direction and it bends sharply. Every step away from royal wounds and toward lifestyle content, lost audience. Every single one. The market was sending a message in the only language a streaming platform understands, which is viewing figures. And the message was brutally simple. We do not want the brunches. We want the palace. And the man at Althorpe tore it up with 4 words. Now let me give you a frame for what was really happening underneath all of this. Strip away the emotion for a moment and just look at the assets, like an accountant would. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties and gave up the use of their official styles, they had to build a commercial life on something. What they had was fame with an expiry date, and one asset more bankable than all the rest combined, Diana. Her face, her myth, her martyrdom. And here is my central read, the contrarian one, the through line I want you to carry out of this video. In plain business terms, the Sussexes had been trading on a brand without holding the license. Because the actual license holder, the keeper of the archive, the controller of the estate, the owner of the originals, was a 62-year-old man in Northamptonshire whom, apparently, nobody in the operation had thought to consult. Watch the escalation, the way it reads on a ledger. 2018, the aquamarine ring at the reception, the first borrowing, received warmly, felt like family. Then the butterfly earrings, the Cartier watch, the bracelets, each one timed to a guaranteed photograph. 2021, the interview, the old architecture rebuilt from the foundations up. Diana's template, repurposed, then the documentary series. Her tragedy converted into their origin story. Diana as the justification, the framework, the foundation. And finally, 2026, a request for the vault itself. The diaries, the home movies, Althorpe as a film set, the halo fitted to a new head. They began by borrowing her jewelry. They ended by asking for her soul. Each withdrawal larger than the one before. Each one made without consulting the man who keeps the account. And the final one bounced. Here is the thing about unauthorized withdrawals. They work beautifully, right up until the day you need the bank manager to approve a real loan. And the bank manager, it turns out, had been quietly watching every single transaction. And now we arrive at the piece that transforms the entire story. The development most royal coverage has either missed completely or buried in a single throwaway paragraph. Because Charles Spencer, by all accounts, did not stop at rejecting the proposal. He reportedly did not make his decision in a vacuum at all. Sources close to the palace have been quietly describing a relationship most royal watchers have been sleeping on entirely. The understanding between Diana's brother and Diana's eldest son, It is no secret that Prince William has been privately furious for years about the commercialization of his mother's image. He has said, in essence, that he believes the deceitful way that old interview was obtained substantially shaped what his mother said in it. But understand William's position precisely. He is the future king. Every action he takes generates consequences that ripple outward. He cannot publicly block his own brother's media projects without manufacturing a global headline about palace censorship and open family warfare. When the institution blocks something, it always reads as the establishment protecting itself. But when Diana's own brother, the man who stood in Westminster Abbey and vowed before 2 billion people to protect her sons, calls a project a joke, that is something else entirely. That is not institutional control. That is family honor, and nobody can spin it. There is no palace to blame. There is only one brother telling another brother exactly what he thinks of what is being done with their sister's memory. Do you see the sheer elegance of it? The one man free to say no is the one man whose no cannot be weaponized. William never had to lift a finger. And I would suggest to you that this is not coincidence so much as alignment. Two guardians of the same memory arriving at the same wall from two different directions. Let me connect this to something that, on the surface, has nothing to do with royalty at all. Think about how diplomacy actually works at the highest level. When two governments cannot speak to each other directly without losing face, the message travels through a back channel, a private citizen, an elder statesman, someone with standing on both sides and a uniform on neither. The envoy gets to say the unsayable, precisely because he holds no official office and answers to no department. That is exactly the role Charles Spencer now occupies inside this family conflict. He has standing with the public. He has blood ties to both princes. He has moral title to Diana's memory. And he has no constitutional position whatsoever. The palace cannot tell Netflix no without a scandal. William cannot tell Harry no without a headline. But the Earl in Northamptonshire can tell everyone no in 4 words before breakfast, and the only address that takes the hit is a villa in Montecito. This is why the powerless position is sometimes the most powerful one in the room. The king is trapped by his crown. He cannot speak freely because every word he says becomes policy, becomes precedent, becomes a constitutional event. The heir is trapped by his inheritance, bound to protect an institution that cannot be seen to fight in public. The whole genius of monarchy, its silence, its restraint, its refusal to be dragged into the daily brawl, is also its cage. It cannot answer an attack without dignifying it. But a brother, an uncle, a private man with 500 years of name and not one single official duty is bound by none of that. He can do the one thing the crowned heads cannot. He can simply say what he thinks, out loud, and let it land. The institution's weakness in that single moment became the family's strength, and it wore the face of the one man nobody could silence and nobody could spin. And then came the move nobody saw coming. In a discreet but remarkable step, Charles Spencer is said to have written to Prince William directly, urging the future king to publicly address the deepening crisis between Prince Harry and the royal family. And before anyone mistakes that for a warm peace overture, let me be blunt. By all accounts, this plea was not about emotional reconciliation. It was about strategy, stability. The global standing of the British monarchy itself. The reported contents are striking in their clarity. The silence cannot continue. Harry, in the eyes of the world's media, has become a symbol of weakness. No longer seen as the soldier, the prince, the statesman, but as a reactive figure consumed by the story of his wife. Spencer reportedly warned that by ignoring Harry completely, by treating him with total indifference, the royal family is effectively handing the Sussexes an open microphone, letting them dominate the global narrative unchecked, while traditional royal values are mocked in real time. Read that again and let it land. Diana's brother, the man who once stood at her funeral and challenged the Windsors to their faces, is now reportedly urging the future king to defend the crown's image. If you wanted a single data point to measure how completely this saga has rearranged the loyalties of this family, there it is. Meanwhile, the deeper fracture has not moved, not 1 inch. According to recent reporting, the royal family is open to some form of peace talks with Prince Harry, but remains extremely reluctant to reconcile with Meghan Markle. And just weeks after Harry sent aides to London to meet with King Charles's communications secretary, it emerged that the core of the rift comes down to a single word: trust. There is none. And here is the part I want you to truly sit with, because it is extraordinary. The royal family's greatest fear is not Meghan's anger. It is not her grievances. It is her content calendar. They are afraid that any private conversation they have with her becomes raw material for the next media venture. Every honest moment, every family exchange, every quiet word over dinner, all of it potentially filed, packaged, and turned into a streaming product within 18 months. The same reporting suggests Harry may eventually find himself traveling to the United Kingdom alone, without Meghan, without the children. If he wants any kind of relationship at all with what remains of his family, King Charles has reportedly maintained a deliberate silence across the thousands of miles separating him from his youngest son, even as Harry has reportedly offered to share his diary dates as a gesture of transparency. William and Catherine, by these accounts, have not spoken to the Sussexes in years. That is the real inheritance of this saga. Not a documentary, not a streaming deal, two brothers who cannot find a road back to each other, and a family watching from Althorpe with a gate that stays locked. Now, before you pick a side, I want to give both sides of this the full weight they genuinely deserve, because this is not a story with a cartoon villain. On one side, those who back Charles Spencer and Prince William argue that Diana's story has already been told and retold across thousands of hours of content spanning 30 years. That converting her memory into a content pipeline risks trivializing the emotional weight of her death. That a 30th anniversary should be a moment of private reflection, not a premiere with a marketing plan and a production credit attached. On the other side, Harry's defenders raise a case that deserves a proper hearing too. Diana shaped both of her sons equally. Harry carries a dimension of the historical record nobody else alive can supply. What it was actually like to be her child, to hold her hand through hospital wards and homeless shelters, to lose her at 15 and carry that loss in full public view for the rest of his life. Nobody can take that perspective from him. And nobody should try. So try standing in both pairs of shoes before you decide. Here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine you are William. The most painful event of your entire childhood is being scheduled as a content drop. A premiere date, an algorithm, arranged by your own brother's production partners. You never consented to your grief becoming a product. You never agreed to your mother's death being a launch event. And yet there it is, being packaged and pitched in boardrooms you were never invited into by people who stand to profit from the worst day of your life. Now imagine you are Harry. You are being told that the story of your own mother, the woman who took you to homeless shelters specifically to teach you what your privilege was actually for, is somehow not yours to tell. You watched her die. You walked behind her coffin as a boy, in front of the entire world. You carried that grief through your whole adult life, through wars, through scandals, through the very public unraveling of your place inside a family that seemed incapable of admitting how broken everything had become. And now you are being told that even your own memories require someone else's approval. Both of those positions hurt. Both are human, both are true at the same time. And the uncomfortable reality is that this may never be resolved, because it is not really a conflict about a documentary at all. It is a conflict about ownership, about who gets to tell a story when that story belongs, in different and equally legitimate ways, to more than one person. So if you want a villain in this, here is mine. And it does not live at Althorpe, or in Montecito, or at Kensington Palace. It lives in the commercial machinery, wrapped around the grief. The apparatus that looks at a mother's handwritten diaries and calculates their streaming value. The system that turns a family's worst years into a record-breaking debut. The industry that has spent 30 years building an economy on Diana's tragedy and then acts surprised when the people closest to that tragedy want a seat at the table. That is what Charles Spencer has been fighting, quietly, for 28 years, with no press releases and no applause. And here is the part that I find almost unbearably quiet. When you really stop and feel it, he gets nothing for this. There is no reward at the end of 28 years of saying no. No award ceremony for the man who refused to sell. No headline that praises him for the documentaries he did not make. The entire architecture of fame rewards the opposite behavior. It rewards the people who open the vault, who give the interview, who sell the access. The world has 100 ways to celebrate someone who finally tells all, and almost no way at all to honor someone who simply, year after year, declines. His protection of his sister is invisible by design because the proof of it is the absence of something, the documentary that never aired, the diary page nobody ever read. You cannot photograph a thing that did not happen. And so the most loyal act in this entire 30-year story is also the one least likely to ever be seen. That, to me, is the real measure of the man. So let me close every loop exactly as I promised you at the start. Loop 1. What was inside the pitch? A 30th anniversary Diana documentary for 2027 asking for Althorpe, the private archives, the handwritten diaries, and the unseen home movies. Built to position Meghan Markle as the 21st century continuation of Diana's story. And pitched at the precise moment the Spotify deal had collapsed, the lifestyle venture was stalling, and the Netflix arrangement was expiring. Loop 2. Why did the gatekeepers say no? Because Charles Spencer reportedly carries the guilt of having introduced his sister to the journalist behind that 1995 interview, and then watching her vulnerability turned into a television product through forged documents. He made a private vow afterward that nobody, not a journalist, not a network, not even a nephew, would ever harvest Diana's pain again, and every refusal since has been an act of atonement. Loop 3. The letter. Far from siding with Harry, Diana's brother reportedly wrote to Prince William, urging the future king to break his silence and defend the crown. Because in Spencer's view, Harry himself is no longer the threat. The unchecked story is. And so here is the question I am leaving on your table tonight. Is it ever right to spend Diana's legacy as currency, even by her own son? Was Charles Spencer right to slam the vault shut? Or does Harry's grief give him a claim that no gatekeeper, however principled, can ever override? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know where you land on this. But carry this line out of here with you, whatever you decide. Diana was exploited once by a man with forged documents and a camera. Her brother has decided she will not be exploited again by anyone with a streaming deal and a rescue plan. The vault at Althorpe stays shut. And perhaps that is the most powerful statement anyone connected to Diana has made in 30 years. Not a documentary, not an interview, not a carefully worded press release. Just a locked gate and a man who refuses to turn grief into contempt. In a media world built almost entirely on doing exactly that, the silence itself has become the loudest thing in the room. There is a strange kind of justice in it too. End quote. The woman who was hunted in life, photographed without mercy, packaged and sold and consumed until the very end, has in death been given the one thing she was never allowed while she breathed: privacy. A part of her that belongs to no one but the people who actually loved her. And it was given to her not by the institution, not by the press, not by any of the people who profited from her, but by a younger brother who decided that some doors stay shut no matter who is knocking and no matter what they are offering on the other side. The only question left is what a desperate operation in Montecito does next. Whether Netflix walks away for good, whether Harry eventually makes that journey to London alone, and whether William, prompted by the very man who stood at his mother's funeral and looked the crown dead in the eye, finally breaks his own long silence. The moment any of it moves, you and I will be the first to talk about it. I will see you in the next one.